name is Aoife Cao from the City of Pittsburgh Department of Innovation and Performance. Welcome to the second Asian Pacific American Heritage Month Community Conversation, co-hosted by Governor Wolf's Commission for Asian Pacific American Affairs and Mayor Peduto's Welcoming Pittsburgh initiative. This event is part of the City of Pittsburgh's Inclusive Innovation Initiative, which is an action to utilize the city's platform to highlight underrepresented communities in Pittsburgh by providing equal access to products and services through inviting everyone to participate and benefit. A quick announcement before we begin. This Saturday, May 16th, from 1:30 p.m. to 2:30 p.m., the Inclusive Innovation team, partnered with the Complete Count Committee, will be hosting a Facebook Live event to engage more residents on taking the U.S. Census, which determines how much federal funding our residents receive over the next 10 years to support schools, hospitals, infrastructure, and community-based services throughout Allegheny County. Much of the undercounted are racial minorities, children under the age of 5, immigrants, and refugees. Our featured guest will be local cookie activist Jasmine Cho, a nationally and internationally recognized baker, artist, and children's book author who creates portraits of inspirational leaders and activists from underrepresented communities on cookies. You can sign up on upcoming events on Welcoming Pittsburgh's Facebook page. For tonight's event, if you do not feel comfortable sharing comments, questions, and anecdotes with your personal Facebook account, please text this anonymous number, also posted to the event page, 412-212-3063. That's 412-212-3063. Our speakers for tonight's panel include Mohan Seshadri, Executive Director of Governor Wolf's Advisory Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs. Kim Din, Statewide Capacity Building Coordinator for Pennsylvania Immigration and Citizenship Coalition and co-founder of Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance Pittsburgh Chapter. Nancy Nguyen, Executive Director of Viet Lead in Philadelphia. Ola Dungana, Specialty Services Advocate with the Women's Center and Shelter of Greater Pittsburgh. Kara Timsina, Executive Director of the Bhutanese Community Association of Pittsburgh, BCAP. Without further ado, I would like to welcome the moderator for tonight's panel, Anupama Jan, Governor Wolf's Commissioner for Asian Pacific American Affairs and Executive Director for Mayor Peduto's Gender Equity Commission. Anu?
Thanks, Aoife. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you all for speaking. We are going to hear some very important information. It is National Heritage Month for AAPI communities, and it's an unusual time for us to be meeting in this way virtually. One of the things that many of us know in AAPI communities is that we are sometimes forgotten. The racial dynamic of Black and white in the US means that when talking about race, sometimes people overlook the millions and millions of very diverse people who come from parts of Asia, who may have been in the United States for generations, right up to people who have immigrated very recently. And the category of AAPI, of Asian Americans, is a political category. And so we want you to hear the stories of different AAPI community leaders right now. We want you to understand some of what's going on, some of the things that may not be on everyone's radar. And even among Asian American communities, I can't know every story. So you'll hear from some people who will share what they're seeing right now. And we hope that we all be better able to stand in solidarity. We know that there are members of AAPI communities who are extremely vulnerable for a variety of reasons, including xenophobia and hate and misinformation. But AAPIs aren't always counted. As Aoife mentioned, it's really important for the census. There are problems and misconceptions about the census, but it is how our government funds communities. It's based on the numbers they collect. So it's really important to be counted AAPIs. And in general, we need disaggregated data. I work with the Gender Equity Commission. Most states didn't initially, most municipalities didn't initially start tracking who was being affected by COVID and how. And when they did, they started doing, once again, a racialized look of Black and white, which is very important given histories of oppression of Black communities in the US. But they haven't even started doing it by gender. one of the major defining factors that in terms of health issues might actually lead to life or death conditions. We don't know what's happening with women who are pregnant. There are lots of complexities, but there are a lot of gender-based issues that are coming up, as well as issues of race. And all of these issues are coming up within Asian communities as well as in all communities. We're all struggling in this time of the global pandemic, but we may not be struggling in the same ways. And so I'm really pleased that we have a diverse range of speakers who are going to talk to the intersectionality of Asian American experience. That means that people who are Asian are not simply defined by that, but they're defined as the rest of the country and the rest of the world by their values, by their upbringing, by their language, by their citizenship status, by their ability. And so the folks today who will be speaking with us will give us some very valuable insights. We are going to start with Kara Timsina, who is going to, each of the speakers is going to answer in a brief description how they responded to questions we provided them in advance. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end, and we'll remind you how to ask questions. We want you to be able to share either through the number that Etha gave you or on Facebook, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. But first, let's hear from two local leaders, after which we'll hear from statewide leaders. And I'm going to turn it over to Kara to answer the questions. What does activism on behalf of the AAPI communities look like right now? And what are the challenges that you are trying to address? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anupama. As introduced, my name is Kara Timsina, Executive Director at the Bhutanese Community Association of Pittsburgh. So activism for the Bhutanese community is limited to the understanding of a lot of what is going on in the field of politics, because we come from such a background where civic engagement was very, very limited. The community is still growing up, understanding what is happening at the national level or at our state and the local level. So it is a way to go to understand how politics works and how best the community members can engage civically. So, for example, we do want to participate in elections. People are interested in going to polling stations, but then many of us, we don't know the background of the candidates. So when we don't know those, it's really difficult to cast a vote, why we are casting vote to a particular candidate. So sometimes there is no option except to go by the political lines. And to my understanding, that is not going to be much useful in the coming elections. So that is one area. The challenges, if I have to mention here, finding resources to meet the community needs is a challenge for the Bhutanese community here in Pittsburgh, and I think it applies to most other community organizations across the state of Pennsylvania and even in the country. Families ask for rental assistance, for assistance with utility bills. I'm talking about the current situation, and we have no such solid answers to give them because we still struggle to find resources for them. As a person, I do not have the capacity to apply for grants, and most of the grants are rather complicated to apply for. The process is complicated. So the state and federal government and foundations, they make, if they make the grant application process easier for community organizations like us, it would be a challenge less for the community organizations. Many foundations do not have faith in smaller community organizations that are still in their early phases. So that's a challenge for BCAP, and I'm sure that would be for some other community organizations too. So we need operational support to do any programming, and that is hard to get. So that is another struggle I have experienced myself. I think we don't stand different from other communities with regards to how we best engage our youths at all times. And of course, this current time, it has been, I think, that the toughest, especially for parents, moms and dads at home. We have seen single moms and dads struggling. We had seen before the pandemic, and that has gone even worse now. So these were some of these challenges we currently face during the current situation. Anupama? Anupama, you are muted.
I was reminded not to speak without checking my mute button, and yet I did that. I just wanted to say thank you so very much. What you said was so important, and I'm going to turn it over to our next speaker. We will then come back and follow up on some things, see if there are questions for the speakers. Unfortunately, Bola can't stay on till 7 p.m. We're so pleased that they made time to be with us on the call. Bola, I'll ask you the same questions. What does activism on behalf of the AAPI communities look like right now? And what are the challenges that you are trying to address?
Actually, like, if I have to, I'd like to address some of the things based on my locality. As Khara belongs to Nepali speaking Buddhist community, he mentioned a couple of things like the background, where we came from, and the way the things, how we practice back home. And here, whatever we practice here in the new environment is like really a big difference. So due to that one, really people are struggling, like accessing those things available. There might be options to explore or achieve them, but just the barrier is language, like not understanding the things. Sometimes people have hesitation about talking about a privacy or confidentiality thing. These are some of the things. So it's really tough just because of the barriers or some of the differences in lifestyle back home and here. So covering up that second part, biggest challenges being myself from the community we are facing here is not able to understand the system. The first one, so I'd like to base on this thing, I'd like to talk some of the things based on my work experience. So I think it would be better, so since I work as an advocate at Women's Center and Shelter as an DV advocate, so most of the people, I'd like to clarify what does Women's Center and Shelter do, who WCNS is. So we are DV agency, and we work pretty much based on DV or IPV related issues. We work with the survivor of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. So right now in Allegheny County, everybody, whenever we talk about a DV or IPV situation, it doesn't discriminate anyone, regardless of your race, your socioeconomic status, who you are, where you came from, what's your ethnicity. It doesn't matter. It happens to anybody at any time. So a lot of people have face difficulties in accessing those available resources to solve their issues or meet their needs related to intimate partner violence and domestic violence. And especially in this pandemic, many of the people, they have extra barriers now. So let me address how, what are the common challenges people face. I'll just like to point out some of the things, all of the services that we provide to our community is directly impacted by this pandemic, COVID-19. There is a challenges in creating a safety planning for the survivor of intimate partner violence. So legal system has been completely impacted. So all of the non-resident services that we do for our survivors are stopped temporarily. Outreaching to community partners have been disturbed. So even like police call, if somebody call like 911 at a moment to address their intimate partner violence situation, the response from police department, the use of interpreter for non-English speakers, everything has been like challenging right now. And there is a main point to understand. As I said, that domestic violence do not discriminate anyone. It doesn't like consider any situation or anything. It can happen at any time. This, there is an increase in severity and frequency of domestic violence in this pandemic situation right now. So there are lots of things. We are respecting CDC guidelines, and if I have to talk about like statewide in Pennsylvania, all of the DV shelters are open, but all besides shelters services, all other services are offered remotely. And as governor or the country is already has that order of home stay. So when there is a family stay time, the chances of having like more violent situation, we see that more and more children are witnessing the situation of domestic violence inside the home at this pandemic situation. Let me share a brief data of Allegheny County, since we serve everybody within Allegheny County. If you go and see, the police call is really high related to intimate partner violence. Filing PFA going down at court has been completely down by 33% now. Like 33% down is like huge impact, we can say. Child abuse report is down by 44%. Even our women's center and shelter hotline calls has been down by 25%. So looking at this statistics, like the data, we can see that there is, on the other hand, there is a severity and frequency of having a domestic violence issue is high, and people have like limited chances of getting these problems solved on other hand. So we have a fear, but while saying that, Women's Center and Shelter is still available. We provide same services to everyone having intimate partner violence or domestic violence, regardless of your like gender, ethnicity, where from what language you speak. It doesn't matter. We provide same quality services to everyone, even in this pandemic situation. And we added some of the features just before. You have seen our website page displayed on like share screen part. So if you go in our website and see, you can find all of this information. How Women's Center and Shelter is responding to this pandemic COVID-19 situation, addressing your needs for survival of intimate partner violence. Everything is included in our website. You can see right now there. So if you have any question, if you do not speak English, we have included multilingual information up there. And the very cool feature thing I'd like to address here is, recently we have started text and chat now option. That is like anybody from any part, you can just text to a certain number and ask your question, ask your needs. So we have advocate available 24/7 for that. So I'd like to call out number from here, and you'll get this information on live event. At the end, we'll try to just address this number there also. So our text and chat number is 240-249-7867. And yes, this number is also available in our website. You can find out. Or if you go like, most of the like majority of our people use social media, Facebook. So if you go in our Facebook page, like Women's Center and Shelter Operator Facebook, you'll find this information there also. So if you have a legal needs, if you have to just meet with any consultations or anything, so all of this information you can achieve this through text and chat option. You may have a questions like, why not we call like hotline? Why not we call you guys and just do instead of doing this chat line? As I said, everybody, we are like quarantined right now at home. So anybody can be with abuser together. So you cannot make a call. You have that safety concern there. So just to cover up that one, you can still text staying with your abuser. So please use this feature, text and chat options that we have developed for everybody to utilize our services, and you can ask any kind of questions related to intimate partner violence to this.
Yes.
And
thank you so much. I didn't, do you want to say one more thing?
okay. Now, actually, like I was about to just say that, you know, like as an advocate, a lot of people have a fear. We understand there is a language barrier normally, you know, like, and there is a barrier of a lot of things, you know, like transportation kind of things. So in this pandemic, the best way, if you have an issue of intimate partner violence or DV related issues, or if you have any questions, if you have issues, if you hear issue about your friends, family, not for yourself, you can still utilize our text and chat options and just get connected. So we will love to provide full service with the same priority to everyone. Even in this pandemic, we are still here to support you. That's all. Thank you, Anupam.
Oh, thank you. And I'm so glad that I didn't cut you off there. But I really, really appreciate that. I wanted to repeat the website, wcspittsburgh.org. That's the Women's Center and Shelter. And I'm going to share my screen in a moment, but you can go there, and I think Bola was making the excellent point that you can text, you can chat. There are ways that you can more easily reach out. That we know people are struggling, and they're struggling in their supposed safety at home. And this is a gender-based problem. The Gender Equity Commission hosted a town hall. And so in addition to the Women's Center and Shelter website, once again, that's wcspittsburgh.org, which I highly encourage everyone to visit. There's a lot of information. Bola pointed out that information is translated into many languages. I also want to encourage you to look at the video, if I can get it, of a town hall that the Gender Equity Commission hosted in April. And we have resources, and you can hear Nicole Molinaro, who's the Women's Center and Shelter of Greater Pittsburgh, is in leadership there. And we have resources for local communities, including domestic violence, intimate partner violence, other things that we know are affecting people differently in terms of gender. LGBTQ people are also vulnerable. And the Women's Center and Shelter, as Bola mentioned, does not turn anyone away based on gender identity or gender expression. And so we really, if there's a way that we can on this, during this discussion or later, if you have questions, Bola's with us for a few more minutes, and I'm going to pose some questions, but I'll be getting examples of what people would like to have addressed, and if we can, we will do that. But to leave you with the Gender Equity Commission web page, that's pittsburghpa.gov/GEC. We want you not to miss out on any information that's available, so reach out any which way you can. And
Anu, if I could cut in really quickly.
yes.
Thank you all for, contributing to the important conversation so far. I just want to remind everybody that we are taking comments, questions on the Facebook event, as well as the Zoom video. And if you wanted to remain anonymous, we did set up a texting service, 412-212-3063. So please submit comments for all of our speakers. We are here to serve you at the City of Pittsburgh, and we want to hear from you as well.
Thank you very much. And I didn't have that number memorized, so I'm very grateful that you shared it with us. I will ask Bola and Kara if they want to follow up a little bit in saying, in answering these questions, and then we'll move to our statewide leaders discussion. But Bola and Kara, if either of you would like to address, what do you think the best support, the best policy recommendation you've seen right now that you think would be a positive recommendation to make to municipalities that would support AAPI communities and your communities? Is there a piece of legislation that you know is being discussed on the local, state level that you think really impacts your communities? Do either of you do you want to start, Kara, since you went second earlier?
Sure. So one good example I can just mention here is Governor's Commission on the AAPI Community. That is, I think that is a great initiative where I have met personally Mohan, either in Harrisburg or when he was here in Pittsburgh, asking about communities' needs. So I think that is a great initiative, and without that channel, I think many of the communities, AAPI communities spread across the state would remain uninformed. So for now, I think I can just mention that.
Well, wonderful, because we'll have Mohan speak about the Governor's Commission in a little bit, and so people will know more about that route and also how to reach out. Bola, would you like to add something?
Yeah, like adding to Hara's thing, like the first thing, the policy the community should aware of is like, the first of all is like understanding by people, like our community has to understand what are our rights and options, and just to acquire those rights, to utilize those rights, come forward and try to explore your options and be together and just move forward. I just like to say only this much, like, because many times we see is like, there are like rights, there are things, but people are not coming up or joining themselves to achieve them, like, so let's come together and just look forward and just try to get those things.
And Anupama, to add to that one, I didn't think like mentioning about the Mayor Perito's welcoming Pittsburgh initiative, thinking that everyone is well aware of, but if there are people who have not come to know about this, there is a very great initiative from the part of Mayor William Perito. The committee is working very well with all the communities, all the immigrants and refugee communities. So that is worth mentioning here.
Thank you. And I'm going to switch to our statewide leaders, but I want to thank you so much for being here and for everyone to connect with Welcoming Pittsburgh, that if you saw this event on Facebook, Welcoming Pittsburgh is linked. So absolutely follow that lead. If you're from an AAPI community, and especially from recent immigrant communities, there are lots of folks who want to connect with you. It can feel hard if you're in a new place. And I'm not an expert on a lot of things, but I know how to ask lots of pesky questions again and again until someone tells me how to get an answer. So that I can promise. I may not know the answer, but I'll bug people till I get it. I have one question that came in. How can victims be encouraged to reach out for help? And this is from Sergeant Tiffany Klein Costa, who was a guest on last week's discussion. Bola or Kara,
okay.
Do you answer that?
Okay. What's the question, Anupama? Do you mind to repeat that question?
Yes. How can victim survivors be encouraged to reach out for help?
Okay. The first thing, like, we always concern, our first priority is your safety. First thing, make sure seeking a help, calling hotline or asking anybody, make sure that you understand safety planning. And we never encourage or we never say anyone to leave the situation right away. That is the most dangerous thing in violent situations. So the recommendation would be, watch out for your environment, make sure you are safe, that nobody is gonna hurt you. If you don't feel comfortable calling our hotline or like calling and reaching out on anything, the best option would be the one that I recently shared, text and chat option. That's 240-249-7867. That's our new tool we developed for this pandemic situation. So please utilize that one and just reach out to us. If you don't have that, like if you don't feel your environment supports even texting or calling or anything, reach out to your project plan whom you trust and make a secondary connection to our hotline or anything. But your safety is our first priority. Please be safe and try to reach out for the support. If you need extra, if you need extra support, whoever has asked this question, if you need extra support, you can reach out to me, like personally, for safety planning tips. I love to do that. So feel free to ask our advocate. Any of our advocates are women centered and sheltered about safety planning.
And so asking victims to reach out for help doesn't mean you have to call 911. It doesn't mean we're going to immediately embroil you with the police. What Bola is saying, you can reach out for help, which means I'm a human being, and look, here's a human being who's inviting me, encouraging me to reach out. You can just say, hey, I want to talk to someone. And that's what we have supports for. So thank you very much. And I'm going to, on that note, I'm going to segue to the next set of speakers. But I feel this information is really important. And Bola, can you say once again, slowly, the phone number that people should communicate?
Okay, I'll say I'm gonna give like 2 phone number. Let me call out our 24/7 hotline number. Okay, this is different first.
Yeah.
That's 412 687 8005.
Great.
One more time, 412 687 8005. That's our hotline number. But here is my thing. Many times, everybody do not feel comfortable calling hotline number, staying at home, staying together with the abuser or perpetrators.
Sure.
So just to protect everybody, we make our calling or chatting line accessible right now. That's called text and chat. And that number is 240-249-7867. So if you just have a question for your friends, feel free to text and ask, hey, I have a friends who may be struggling with this situation. I need a support. How can I help? So we love to provide that support we have available for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we are now going to move to a bit of a look at the statewide level. So we heard from local community leaders in Pittsburgh, but we also have a chance now to hear from Nancy, Kim, and Mohan. Mohan, since the Governor's Commission has just been raised, can I turn it over to you? And you also were asked the question, what you think activism looks like right now on behalf of AAPI communities, and what are the challenges that you are trying to address?
Absolutely. So I would say that, so for those who don't know, the Governor's Advisory Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs exists to advise the governor on Asian Pacific American affairs, and also especially over the last 6 or so years has really moved into an advocacy position focused on Harrisburg, trying to make sure that APIs in Pennsylvania have all the tools and resources that our communities need to be safe and healthy and strong. So in terms of what we've seen from activism and organizing around Pennsylvania over the last 2 months, I think a lot of it has just been centered on meeting those most basic needs that so many of our communities have, and that honestly is not being met by many other institutions and organizations that aren't dedicated to serving our communities. There are thousands of amazing organizations staffed by amazing people and amazing volunteers dedicated to serving their communities. But if you don't have language access, if you've never dealt with our communities and know what is culturally competent for our communities, in many cases, you're not going to be, through no fault of your own, able to actually serve our communities, which is why in so many cases we've seen API community associations and service organizations having to step up and do 2x, 3x, 4x the amount of work they should be having to do the job of other organizations in addition to their own. We've seen organizer and volunteer and community leader after community leader take on translation needs and messaging needs alone, far beyond what they're called to do or what they're being paid to do. And we're deeply thankful for all their effort and all their work, but we also know that these are services, these are resources that should have existed from the get-go and that we're committed to happening in the future. In terms of how our work as a commission has shifted over the last 2 months or so, You know, we went into as you especially of all people on this call know, we went into 2020 with a million different plans around civic engagement, around making sure more Asians were appointed to boards and commissions that didn't have Asian in the name, like the Fishing and Wildlife Commission and the Medical Association and things like those. You know, we had plans around healthcare, around curriculum in public schools. And I think especially in the first month, we really went into rapid response on nothing more than like, what are the most basic needs APIs have? And how can we move government machinery to make them happen? So we did things like make sure that everything that the government in terms of Department of Health and unemployment compensation and labor and industry were putting out for the general public, we could get that translated into up to 8 different API languages. We build rapid response networks and statewide toolkits for our communities to push that information out and serve as a resource sharing hub statewide, both so that government resources could be moved to our communities most efficiently and translated, but also so that if folks in Pittsburgh were doing something, that folks in Philly could know about that resource existing. So we're really proud of the work we got to do there, but we also know that it would be completely impossible without not just our amazing commissioners, but also our amazing community associations that are really on the front lines of all this work.
Thank you, Mohan. That was unsurprising, and there's a historical challenge here because I spoke about the relative invisibility of AAPIs and some of the American narratives that we often get overlooked. And when we get seen, it's often, as last week's discussion pointed out, as a model minority. And that means that this question of who is really in need, some stereotypes that suggest that AAPIs are mostly, doing well, that in fact we know, as Mohan said, that many in AAPI communities were struggling with basic needs before this. And so we have people in more vulnerable positions and situations that may have already existed. And so on the one hand, we need to get people talking about AAPIs. We need more representation on things that don't just say AAPI, like fish and wildlife, and which is very important to me, the ecology of our great Commonwealth. But that all of those things are important. So we need to keep encouraging people to see the complexity of AAPI communities, like the languages you mentioned, because otherwise the government resources and community resources that are supposed to be for all of us end up, and I would say in many cases inadvertently, not serving our communities. So thank you for sharing that. We are now going to hear from Nancy Wynn. I believe Nancy's on the call. Can you tell us what your answers are to the questions of activism on behalf of the AAPI community now, and what challenges you're facing, Nancy?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I know that I've been, first of all, I want to appreciate folks for inviting me on. I've been kind of slated as a statewide somebody who can respond statewide, and actually our organization, just like BAOP, is really focused in Philadelphia County. So I'm the executive director of Viet Lead, and we work in the Vietnamese and Southeast Asian community in Philadelphia County, and actually also South Jersey. So I kind of want to talk from that perspective. What Asian American activism looks like today, I think, for us, it's going to be definitely like everyone else. We're really impacted by COVID-19 response. What we've been doing has been reaching out, like basically our entire organization. We do youth organizing work, health and healing work, civic empowerment work. We do community defense work, which looks at how to support folks who are facing ICE deportation and detention, and urban ag. Reconnecting with our cultural roots, but all 5 of those areas of work have actually just been moving in response to COVID. So what that means is, like, all of the folks that we usually would have under our civic engagement program, right? Calling folks to help them register to vote, calling folks to help them understand what is going on with the electoral, or what is going on with elections. they are doing that and also doing COVID-19 check-ins with our communities. Very similar to what Mohan said, it's a ton of stuff that's happening. There's like policies that are happening statewide, citywide, tons of changes. I mean, for example, when the stay-at-home order happened, when the city mayor said that they had to close all non-essential businesses, how would you know if your business was essential or non-essential if all of the language is in English, right? If everything was in English. And so, you know, we really worked with the Governor's Commission to try as quickly as possible to have some of that information, for instance, translated in multiple languages. And I have to say, both at the city level and at the state level, I've seen so much more response to materials translated in different languages so that our communities are equipped with the right information. And I think that goes a long way to say that not only do we have great leadership in those roles, but our communities have matured in Pennsylvania to some extent, that they're being recognized to some extent, right? I also want to touch back on this whole idea of like the model minority and how we're invisibilized. I think that what we found in our COVID-19 work has also been that a lot of low-income Asian American folks are being impacted, are getting sick from COVID because they're essential workers, right? So we're talking about factory workers, we're talking about folks who are still working in food distribution. And I feel like that's not being talked about nearly enough. If you search for like who's getting impacted by COVID and like who's actually getting sick, I'm worried that our communities are being overlooked because we are invisibilized by both this model minority myth about who we are and also these stories of these factory workers who are generally limited English proficient. They do not have like protections. They may be mixed status folks. They are Asian American. They are part of our communities, but they are being invisibilized. And I think that a lot of the work for our organizations is A, connecting with those folks, B, trying to work to support them in feeling like feeling empowered to speak on what's going on, feeling empowered to demand their rights, which also, by the way, is changing under COVID-19. Like, does anybody here know what sick pay looks like now? What size is your company? There's all of this stuff, I think, that is both like a challenge for our community, but also presents opportunities for activism and organizing in different ways. And organizing not only as Asian American folks, but Asian American factory workers in solidarity with other workers who are on the same line and who are also getting sick, right? And so I think that the opportunity for multiracial organizing in this time because of the crisis is also presenting itself in different ways. I guess the very last thing that I'll plug, and I'm sure like folks, you know, you've heard it across the spectrum, is like, you know, elections is so important, and making sure that our folks know all of the changes to the landscape, right? You know, primary is now at a different time on June 2nd. Also, vote by mail, how to make sure that our folks are going to actually fill out that application, which right now is only in English, and then actually fill out the ballot, which also is in English. I mean, we have a lot of work to do to A, get the information out, and B, support our communities in making sure that their voices are heard in that way, not only in Pennsylvania, but critically in Pennsylvania. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Once again, that was a wealth of information, and I'll just highlight two things before Kim speaks, which is vote if you are able to, and that once again, this group of people, this Facebook page, wherever you're watching this, type in a comment and someone will try and reach out to you if you want to know how to get help with this idea of voting. Where can I get information about candidates? And then I just wanted to highlight the opportunities for potentially multiracial activism. And that has been a real challenge as well for our communities, that anti-Black racism is so strong and pervasive throughout the US, and many immigrants actually arrive in the United States through Hollywood, through popular culture, with a lot of stereotypes about other American racial groups. And so we also need to work within our communities to say that it's in our best interest to work in solidarity, that white supremacy affects everyone in the United States negatively. And that's something that we can work with allies from all sorts of backgrounds to challenge and dismantle. Even at the same time that we're looking within our communities and noticing gender-based patterns and problems, they are universal. It doesn't matter what race, age, income, education, domestic violence and intimate partner violence occur in every community, including AAPI communities. And we need to not deny that these things happen, but as Bola was saying, we need to reach out. We need to say we're here when we can be to people in our communities, especially if they're isolated for whatever reason. After highlighting those two things, I'd like to turn it over to Kim. We started a few minutes late, but we will, I promise, get to some questions and answers as well. But Kim, please take it away.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Kim. I am a staff person at the Pennsylvania Immigration and Citizenship Coalition. We're a statewide organization of about 60 member organizations all across the state. The LEAD and BCAP are two of them. They do awesome work. Love working with them. So we do work mostly on like the advocacy level, right? So for us, I feel like we always deal with crises in our work, right? But for us right now, it feels like seeing the intersections of these different systems that aren't working being amplified in this pandemic. So things, you know, with immigration, housing, healthcare, LGBTQ issues, I think all of those things are just being amplified. So we're rapidly responding to things coming up like lots of housing, lots of jobs in our communities, but also kind of like thinking about how we're using that and pivoting into how to use it, how to use this moment to draw attention to how the system isn't working and has never worked for vulnerable communities. You know, like I'm gonna, you know, a lot of the things that I'm gonna say are gonna echo what Nancy said, but before this moment, some of the big ideas seemed really impossible, right? Like things like universal income, like things like healthcare for all, they seemed really impossible. But this moment is showing us that big ideas are possible and that we should be using this moment to have a big vision, have big demands, because that's the only way that we're going to move forward. And if anything is going to change. And I think that in this moment, our work at PIC and just myself as a person is making sure that API voices are also being included in those like statewide demands, those national demands, right? Lastly, we also need to think about how we're funding and supporting the work of people on the ground doing this work of responding to community needs, because there's so much work that's being done and so little funding that's going into the people doing them. But also, you know, not missing the moment to organize and to build power as API people and shift the narrative around what we as API people, as immigrants, as workers need and deserves in terms of how the system needs to change and policies and whatnot. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. I will pass on any questions from the audience as they come in. Those are being very handily sorted for me. But I wanted to ask and open it up to our last three speakers. I heard what the challenges were, and I think I was hearing a repetition. I mean, of course, the first biggest challenge is resource. And what Kim just said is, resources have never been equitably distributed in our society. An undue share of our resources have gone to certain demographic groups. That's how the country was built. So we're already starting with those inequities built into our society. So certainly getting resources to people, basic needs so that they can survive. Gender-based and other kinds of violence that people are experiencing, and then wanting to be civically engaged, all the barriers that are in place. So if one can meet one's basic needs but wants to vote, and yet the applications are not translated, this denial of the actuality of the United States is a country in which people come speaking many different languages. And that it's good to know some of the positive things that are happening. And please do be sharing. there's still time if you have a question that you want. I will ask a couple of questions in a second, but please, in the next little while, if you've got a burning question, tell us, ask us, and we'll ask our experts, our leaders. But I was going to say that there are some positives in the sense of opportunities to think big ideas, to make coalition with groups that normally we might say we don't share the same interest. Right now, the human race shares an interest in having the best public health and trying to have a new normal after the pandemic, and we in the Gender Equity Commission are talking about that as a new equitable normal. So we don't want to go back to the way things were with systems that have been broken, that haven't worked for our most vulnerable. We want to go back to something where we take our big ideas and how do we make change in the world with our big ideas. We do it through policy. We do it through things like the Governor's Commission, Governor Wolf's Commission on AAPI Affairs, which Mohan is the executive director for, through Viet Lead, through all of these organizations that have been mentioned, the Bhutanese community organizations and other groups, that we're seeing things that are possible now. I wanted to ask about, if you're willing to share, the personal toll that this takes. I heard about the challenges and the systemic barriers, that the suffering that COVID is causing is universal. Anyone on the planet is experiencing that. AAPI communities are experiencing particular challenges based on their own intersectional backgrounds. Anybody want to share what you are finding challenging as a human being, uniquely you?
Can I go first? Because I have kids and I need to go help feed them.
Yes, please. And thank you for that being something to share, because I do not have children. And so I know that there are a set of barriers there that I'm not facing. So.
Yeah, no problem. And I think Kara was saying it before too. So I have two kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I think in terms of personal toll, I think like I feel generally lucky because I am, I did not lose my job. My partner did not lose their job. And I have the privilege of working from home. I have access to the computer, internet, and I have access to those things. On the other hand, I do feel like all of these articles now on sort of how much unpaid labor did we do before this? Now, how much unpaid labor are we doing now? There's like a new calculator of unpaid labor in terms of all of us working from home with kids, homeschooling them. I'm not, but a lot of my friends are. And I am wondering about what new place are we going to get to in terms of what is understood as productivity, what work looks like, what work has to look like in this next year, because we can't go as we have. I have put in 70-hour weeks, I feel like, every week since the COVID-19 thing started. I speak Viet, and so at the same time as doing this work, bring interpreters for people, connecting folks to people, because we're like the only Vietnamese organization, for instance, in South Jersey. I get this outsized impression in my head that if we don't get this information out in Vietnamese, no one else will. And what would that impact be? That is so unhealthy. It's unhealthy, but it's you can see the precarity of the situation and why, an organization will put themselves in that place. Cause it's well, if it's not going to be done by us, then who? And so I when we say the system was not made for us, right? It's so true in terms of the language needs, in terms of all of the various ways. When people say, if you get sick, you should lock yourself in a room. Well, how many bathrooms does your house have? How many rooms do you have to what if, what if you don't? So I just feel for me, most of this has been just severe overwork. I don't have family members yet who are sick, but I have a lot of friends who, especially Black and Brown friends who not only have friends who are sick, but who have family members who are passing away. I think we're going through a national like long-term traumatic experience. And so the mental health impacts of this, I don't even know how to talk about yet. So there's a lot to unpack. But I appreciate opportunities like this to share, and then to just hear from other folks around the state, because I feel like sometimes Philadelphia in and of itself is a bubble. Thank you.
And Bola, if you also would like to answer this question, I have one question that about if as you answer, how people can help. So say some people who have more privilege, who maybe don't have kids, who have certain time to give. So not asking about financial donations, but as if you talk about how you're feeling, you know, personal challenges or other things you want to share, if you want to suggest a way that somebody could help you, and then people don't know you, but how can people be helping, especially for young people maybe trying to connect but don't know exactly how to do so. So let me turn it over to those of our speakers who haven't had a chance. And my original question was, do you want to share a challenge you're personally facing? And if not, how do you recommend other people help?
Let me jump in, Anupama, to let you know Vola has left. So part of that question, I think, will be left unanswered. But I would like to just mention here about the personal toll. So as the pandemic hit and then we got into the lockdown, to assist our families, we have a robocall system to keep them informed what is happening. And then we have, to date, I think we have around 1,000 plus phone lines on our system. So what we did was we sent a message to call our office if they had any problem. So we had just started with the census work on the census application. So there were floods of phone calls on how to complete the census. And then came the unemployment compensation. So many community members needed assistance to help, to get help with the unemployment compensation. And then we started on the emergency relief supplies. So what happened personally was I started getting phone calls irrespective of what time it was. Of course, I took phone calls until 9 p.m. and then stopped. But then to get back to the personal level, doing so in order to help the community members, I was not completely doing my family job. I left my daughter's education part to my wife. So she is also working full-time from home. She's working upstairs. I'm working from the basement. But then I have left my responsibility of the family to my wife alone, so that I'm able to take phone calls from the community members. So this is what is happening now.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing. And everyone who is on this call and many people are doing work within their communities. And so I think it's also helping people who are most vulnerable and then helping the helpers. And so Ethan and I and Ernest, who is helping in the background and collecting questions, which I've been feeding to our panelists. I want to just say thank you to all of you activists, all of you who your job is taking care of other people, and I can imagine the burnout and the toll. Mohan, Kim, would you like to share something?
Yeah, I'm gonna go off of what Kara said also. So I think a personal toll, right, is well, I mean, I still have my current job, which is great, but about 2 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case because I was working in a restaurant. I would have been losing my job. My family, my family now is losing their jobs, but they are able to like get the stimulus check. They're able to apply for unemployment. 2-3 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case, right? So I think that for kind of thinking about how it is in Pennsylvania and the work that we're doing, there are just thousands and thousands of families that are not eligible to receive unemployment, to receive any kind of stimulus or cash assistance. So one of the things that you could, like the public could do to help, if you have the money, if you have the cash, is to donate to the Pennsylvania Immigrant Relief Fund, which is a statewide fund that we had at PIC with so many of our partners across the state have been working to build very quickly, I might say, in the past few weeks. So right now, we had a foundation in Philadelphia donate $500,000 to it, which sounds like a lot of money, right? But if we give like $800 to each family, that's a very small amount of money to each family. That would only serve 600-ish families. And again, we have thousands and thousands of families just waiting for some kind of cash assistance, and anything helps really. So if it's okay, I can share with you kind of the link to donate. And that would be really helpful, actually.
I think that, yeah, get that over to us in the chat, and I'm going to toss that on to Ernest and Etha's to-do list, if that's okay. Mohan, would you? I think we were scheduled 6 to 7, and we started a few minutes late. So I will only take 30 seconds at the end, and maybe Etha has a comment. But Mohan, it's your time.
Sure. I mean, I think like just to echo everything the other said, despite like there being no travel and being locked at home, the hours are just constant. The calls are just constant. I think the shock of the first 2 weeks alone turned a bunch of my hair gray, and I was not expecting to have to pull off that look for like another 10 years. But I would say that, I mean, something that we talked a lot about at the commission beforehand, and is now going to be even key, is just mental health access for API communities. It's not great right now. We all know it. We know that there's work that needs to be done. It was a priority for the commission for 2020 already. But between just what everyone is dealing with and the added stress of having folks across the country at the national and international level call this a Chinese virus, an Asian virus, a Kung flu, things like that. You know, mental health lines, suicide prevention lines across the country that are dedicated to Asians are spiking across the board. And we know that so many of these services that aren't specific to our communities aren't set up for us, like what everyone else has said. So something that we're about to start pushing for is, in general and specific to health and specifically, is what does the recovery from all this look like? Things are horrible right now. Things are grim right now, but this is going to end. And do we want to go back to how things were before? Or do we want to see this pandemic as a portal into what a world that actually includes us, accepts us, and meets us where we are and who we are can be? Whether it is language access, whether it is equitable data, whether it is proper health equity with full health access for all our families, regardless of their documentation status, regardless of their insurance status, regardless of what language they speak or what their culture is. I hate to put one more thing on all the amazing organizers and leaders that are currently fighting the fight on the front lines, but we need to start thinking about this now if we're going to actually get through the recovery as well.
Thank you so much. And I will mention that we are going to keep putting the contact information that we're getting from our speakers. We'll put them on the Facebook page. Maybe if I can create a document and someone shows me how to do that, we'll pin it. We'll just make sure that we share out these resources. I think what I want to highlight is that our speakers are working on overlapping and intersecting areas, but they're also helping different communities in specific ways. They're wonderful and amazing. And I think that I'm feeling very glad to have this moment to connect with all of the speakers. And so I think I'm going to say something incredibly cheesy, which is reach out. It is actually true that those of us who are doing this call, Etha Cow, Ernest Rajakoon, and myself, and every one of the speakers, we are people who are trying to say, we're here. We don't have all the answers. We may not always have the resources, but you can certainly make contact with us. AAPI communities are suffering. We heard words like need, suffering, people are losing things. There's a lot of grieving. I would like to echo something that Nancy said. Anyone who doesn't acknowledge that we're in a period of global trauma is really not paying attention to something. and it's important that we all say, we are in this together, because even though we're all sharing the trauma, that's the only way to lighten that burden, is to share with each other. So I think the mental health question is also, once again, to say, it can feel like we're alone sometimes. Or if we live in an apartment with 8 people, it never feels like that. But when people are, in any way suffering because they haven't made a connection, please, please hear all of the speakers and reach out and connect with us. I'm going to turn it over to Etha to conclude.
Thank you, Anu, and thank you all for such an important conversation, the second of 4. So our next one will be addressing small business resources next week. Yeah, again, I'm just going to echo what Anu said. Anu, Ernest, myself, as well as all of our speakers, we are here for you. The City of Pittsburgh is here to support you during this difficult time. So please do reach out. And thank you all for attending. And we look forward to continuing to advocate for the AAPI community and show that Pittsburgh is truly a community for all. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.